So setting the stage is about reminding people what's at stake. If you slip, trip, fall, cut yourself, or whatever with a highly dangerous pathogen, you can die. You can cause a major outbreak.
Luca Filippo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
I'm super stoked to get to talk to you. You bring a lot of industry insights that we haven't necessarily had on the podcast, from aviation to biology. I'm super eager to sort of see where this goes, and I know that I'm going to learn a lot of things. For those in the audience who might not be familiar with your work, I think it might be a good idea. Just give us a quick rundown of where you're from and how you got your start in where you are today.
Sure. Right. Well, I've always wanted to be a helicopter pilot since I was a little kid. That's always been my dream. So when I, finished high school, the first thing I went to was flight school. So I got my helicopter pilot's license, the first one, the private pilot's license, actually before I got my driver's license. So
Before?
Before. Yeah, that was the timing. That was how anxious I was to get the pilot's license. So I continued towards my commercial pilot's license, did my certified flight instructor rating, and something that was very exciting that was going on at the time, and by the way, I'm from Rio, Brazil. Something that was going on at the time was that our Civil Aviation Authority was starting to require safety management systems from general aviation operators. So safety management systems were already required for Part 21 or commercial airlines operations, and it was a new thing for general aviation. And general aviation includes flight schools and air charter as well. So the reason why I'm saying this is because there was this need to teach operators about safety management systems. Our authority was giving all these courses, weeks-long courses for everybody to attend and become qualified. So as I was working on getting my licenses and ratings, I was also working on becoming a safety officer and qualifying myself as a safety officer, and attending all these courses and learning a lot. So that's basically when I think I was kind of bitten by the safety bug, because I got a chance to hear a lot of accident investigators talk about past events and so on, and I thought, this is so cool. Like I need to read more about accidents because they were just fascinating. So after I got my licenses, I did a little bit of sightseeing as a pilot. Then I went to work for flight school as a safety manager. So that was my first formal experience within safety, and of course reading all the good books on the side. So read a lot of James Reason's books. I'm a huge fan of Reason's. And then at one point, my wife and I decided to move to Europe. So we went to Portugal. Long story short, I joined the world's largest business aviation operator. They had their European headquarters was in Lisbon. So I joined the safety department initially as a flight safety analyst, so looking into the safety reports, doing investigations, also taking care of safety promotion and so on. And at one point, they liked how I was passionate about safety training and promotion, so they created this new role for me as a safety training and promotion specialist. So I did that. So I gave a lot of training sessions, like crew members, leadership, maintenance, you name it. So that was pretty exciting. But at one point, I wanted to get a master's. I've always liked to learn, and I wanted to pursue a master's. So I found one in Canada within risk management. And at the time, and they were doing research within biological research. So the professor, I was talking to the professor, and the professor said, this is the project that we have. We are concerned about future pandemics and how we can prevent them. I think your background in aviation would be just, something that could, benefit us in terms of expertise. And I accepted the invite, came to Canada. I've been doing my master's ever since, 1.5 years ago. And I've been learning a lot. And one of the things that I've been learning, and I think it's probably one of the things we're going to be discussing today, is how safety as practice in certain industries can be used and applied to different fields as well. So, and case in point, I know very little about biology. You end up, learning a few things along the way, but essentially I'm not a trained biologist or anything like that. But I'm teaching people in biology new things because safety, I'm teaching them, system safety methods as we apply in aviation, chemical, and nuclear, and so on. And we're applying them to biology because biology and biological research does not have the same level of safety maturity than other high-risk industries. So, sorry, that was a pretty long answer.
No, I loved it.
Just to provide a little bit of context.
There's so much there, and I think that it's really interesting that you come at it from so many different perspectives. And like you mentioned, coming into biology, not knowing a ton about it, right? But bringing in these safety perspectives, having been an investigator and seeing the root causes of safety failures. What are some of the lessons that you learned as an investigator that you're able to bring in now to help teach people in the space when they're, in a lab?
I think, well, one of the things that we have in aviation, and we talk about safety maturity, what we talk about is the maturity and how comprehensive the methodologies that we use are. So transporting that to biology is... it requires some effort because they have to be practical, right? The laboratory environment is pretty dynamic. There's a lot of variables. So you have to come up with something that people will use and make sense to people. But the bottom line is the notion around safety management systems as practiced in workplace safety, nuclear safety, and so on, is 100% translatable to biological research. So this notion that, the system is going to be subjected to hazards and problems and issues that we must address in order to ensure the safety of the operations. So the same notion is 100% translatable to biology. So it's not too much about adapting, but teaching people about the possibility of these tools and how they can improve workplace safety. One of the things that I ended up learning from biological safety, in a way, is how certain ideas that we had in system safety, for example, are actually not applicable to biosafety. So what I'm trying to say is one of the theories out there when we talk about safety is Heinrich's pyramid, the incident pyramid. So we have God knows how many incidents and injuries for every accident, right? And there's a ratio. Now, one of the things that we say in system safety that the things that kill people are not the same things that cause people to slip and trip, right? But in biology, that's a bit different, because if you slip, trip, fall, cut yourself, or whatever, with a highly dangerous pathogen, you can die. You can cause a major outbreak, right? So I'm kind of having to shift my mindset a little, my perspective a little bit to understand that, okay, maybe all that criticism about Heinrich's pyramid is true for biological safety. But
So it's interesting, and I think that this comes up. A lot of safety professionals do end up over time switching, maybe not careers, but switching industries. What advice would you have to those individuals who are kind of in the middle of a switch or transitioning their knowledge? What kind of advice would you give to them to make that switch successful like you have?
I think a successful safety professional in any industry is a person who is willing to listen and to learn from people. And it's more important than communicating, if that makes sense, right? Of course, there'll be those moments where you have to do the talking, right, and the teaching and the coaching. But more importantly, you have to be a great listener. And also, pick frameworks that work for you. What I'm trying to say is, a safety management system and things within a safety management system, like the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. These tools can be applicable, wherever. So you can definitely carry them from one industry to another. And with the knowledge that you're going to gain from the frontline workers, from your new management, right? You're simply going to adapt your processes and ensure that everything is running smoothly when it comes to managing risks.
So it's not one size fits all is what I'm getting. There's when you go into a new space, you have to observe what works, what doesn't work, and that might be different in a way from, while there are similarities. Is it true that there could be some differences based on your environment?
And I think the differences are going to be, these gaps are going to be filled by the subject matter experts that you're going to be working with. So this is an important difference between aviation safety and safety as practiced in other industries. And what I'm about to say may not necessarily be applicable to all aviation operators or all philosophies within aviation safety, but in general, an aviation safety professional is a system manager. She or he is an expert in managing the safety management system. She or he is not responsible for telling people what they should do, at what altitude they should extend the flaps, retract the gear, or they should fly, higher or lower. No, they can be, an airspace engineer, they can be some sort of manager and not an aviation expert, but they must be an expert in risk management methodologies.
When you're swapping over industries to different spaces, what are those kind of tips and tricks to make sure that you're doing that effectively?
Yeah, so another good one is, I was rereading this book yesterday. It's called Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows. And she was saying, like, how do you understand a system? So you step away and you try and understand, where's that system is coming from. Look at historical data, talk to people, try to understand whether the dynamics that exist within that system. So that would be a great starting point for any safety professional. So if they're trying to figure out, culture, for example, try and see what kind of, how, for example, how people deal with power. So power dynamics within an organization, right? And, how everything started and how the organization got to a point where it's at. So that teaches you a lot as a safety professional.
It's massive. And I touching on the power dynamics thing, this is something that I've been thinking about recently, which is the number of incidents that are reported, they're tracked, and they're thrown in a metric sheet. What a lot of people don't see, or what they can't see, and maybe they don't even think about, is those near misses that aren't being reported because the employees don't feel that they can actually report them. And I think this ties in with a bit of psychological safety. How do we go about creating an environment where people feel comfortable to actually speak up and talk, give their boss the bad news?
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. So we're going to be talking about Amy Edmondson, right?
Oh, yeah.
So of course she's got her framework, so one of the pillars, if you will, of a safety culture is a just culture, right? Like people are going to be, they feel comfortable reporting their own errors and even violations without fear of reprisal or being blamed, and so on. So I always ask people, okay, we need a just culture in order to have a reporting culture. But where does a just culture start? And, they think, oh, we got to have a policy, right? So let's write a policy, like stick it on the wall and have the CEO sign it. Now we have to promote it. So let's record a video with the CEO saying, okay, nobody's going to be blamed if they report their errors and violations and so on. So we do all this stuff, but yet we forget the very starting point of a good and robust just culture, which is treating people with dignity. And I'm quoting another author that I'm a big fan of, Juliana Blaise. She's a Brazilian psychologist, and she talks about the importance of dignity within workplace safety, because we get too engineering when it comes to safety. We get too technical, and we completely forget about the people who are running the system. So how do you treat someone with dignity? It should be basic, like for most people, but just in case people don't know, you treat somebody with dignity when you look them in the eye when they're talking to you, when you wish them good morning when they walk into the shop at the beginning of the day, when you actively listen to what they're saying, right? So that is the foundation of a psychologically safe climate, right? And then we can jump into so Edmondson says that there's roughly 3 steps to creating psychological safety. So the first one is setting the stage. So setting the stage is about reminding people what's at stake. So this is the kind of work that we do. These are the risks that we're subjected to. And this is how important it is for you to speak up if you have concerns, right? And at the same time, try and reconnect people to the purpose of their work, right? Everybody goes to work and you know, they long to feel motivated, at least a little bit, right? So try to remind them why they're doing what they're doing, to reconnect them with the work. And then the next step is inviting participation. And that's a key one, right? Because you bring people in and you can invite people to participate by asking questions like, you know, what do you think of this, right? And does anyone have different opinion about this topic? And also, as a leader, you should expose your own lack of knowledge, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know how we can do this, you know, and also at the same time, talk about, you know, stories of your life where you made a mistake or you violated, right? And say that, you know, it's okay to make mistakes. We all do. And your voice really, really matters. And the last step is about responding productively. It's the C in the behavior safety ABC framework. So it's the consequence. So we have the behavior, and then we got to have some kind of consequence that's going to reinforce that positive behavior. So responding productively, you know, it encompasses a lot of things, but one of them is just saying thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. And you don't have to agree with the person's opinion. Like, they can be saying like gibberish to you, but if you demonstrate gratitude, next time they'll come forward again and share something that this time might be useful, right? So you never know. And and ensure people are not blamed or punished, right? That's the bottom line. So the reason why psychological safety is so important for reporting culture is because Edmondson says that we can't see silence. So we can't know when somebody hesitated and did not speak up. It may be that information that person withheld was crucial to managing the risks.
Yeah, you know, I love the passion that you very clearly have for it. Something that you brought up was moving away from blame. And I think that this is a tough line to toe, because oftentimes we go too far one way and we blame, but we still need to find a way to make sure that there's accountability. How do we find that separation?
Well, that's a good question. There's the good type of accountability. I think Sidney Dekker calls it forward-looking accountability. So forward-looking accountability, and I hope I don't explain this wrong, is about, you know, maybe, you know, if you violated knowingly, or, yeah, it's hard to think of a situation where somebody's going to be blamed or held accountable in a bad way. But okay, let's say somebody violated a procedure and it wasn't cool, man. You kind of, you know, everybody was counting on you and so on. And this is an important point. We've already made an effort to understand where that violation came from and what motivated you to violate. And now you must be held accountable, right? So holding someone accountable in a case like that could be like having them share their experience with other people. This is, you know, what happened to me. This is why I think you shouldn't do the same. Or, you know, coming forward and sharing it with the group, because the group is going to rely on you as a group member to achieve good results. So if you provide this kind of accountability to the group, you tell the story to the group, I think, yeah, it would be a positive type of accountability. Where you involve the person right from the start in responding to the event. So, and one of the questions that person should help you answer is, okay, so how do we prevent other people from violating, from making the same mistake or making the same decision?
So we're getting them engaged early
You're
on
involving them.
to make them a part of the solution instead
Exactly.
of just pointing a finger at the problem.
Yeah, because you kind of shift. So you then you turn blame into learning, right? Into engagement, and maybe that person is motivated at the end of the day to not only not make that mistake again, not only violate in that way again, but change their posture in relation to standard operation procedures, for example.
It sounds so simple when you take a step back and you look at the 3 C's, right?
The ABC of
ABC, right?
ABC of behavior. I think that's
ABC of behavior.
Yeah.
And these things all sound so easy to do, right? Treating somebody with respect and looking them in the eyes and all of this. But it very much to me seems like this is going to be a gradual process.
Okay.
It can't just be an overnight, we're going to flip the switch and then it's all fixed.
Yeah. It's about trust,
Right.
isn't it? Right? You don't, and that's why the first step of psychological safety, setting the stage, is so important, because you tell people in advance what you expect from them in terms of failure as well. So this is how we see failure, as a normal thing to being a person, for crying out loud. So if you set the stage just in the right way, you increase that trust and you decrease anxiety, right?
Love it. Yeah, there's this reminds me of, this is going to be another anecdote that I'm speaking of, but in law practice, what lawyers do when they're about to argue a case is typically they say everything that the person they're defending did wrong. And what this does is it's called taking the sting out, because it gets everything out of the way. Okay. And to your point, sets the stage so that everything going forward is it's already been said. What else could you say to me? I know Eminem did this when he did he said everything that could be said negatively about him beforehand, right? And in a way, you're setting the stage so that we're all on the same playing field. So when that lady comes up to speak to you all, she lays out that these are all the mistakes. We're going to make mistakes, right? This is part of the process. And having that acknowledgement, I find, is super powerful, and it really makes everyone very, very comfortable.
Yeah, it made a huge difference.
Huge difference. So coming at this from the perspective of having done investigations, when you're looking at things that have gone wrong, I think this is an interesting perspective to approach, because so often we either hear about safety from the side of people who are being investigated or people who are maybe a little apprehensive about the whole procedure. But what were some of the key things that you would look for to really make an investigation successful?
Oh, yeah. So the classic one is, and I think Decker said this, and probably many other authors as well. James Reason is one. So the question that should steer an investigation is understanding why did it make sense for the person, the error practitioner, if you will, to do what they did? Because we don't come to work to make mistakes or kill people or anything like that. So, what were the, if you will, performance shaping factors that were influencing that person's performance at the time? And more importantly, what was that person's mental model? And I think the concept of mental model, and I think it's also referred to as schema, if I'm not mistaken, is super important, because it's how the person was seeing and understanding the world at that time. So if you can understand, what was going on in that person's head and what kind of cues, information, goals, and motivations were affecting the person's behavior, you can prevent other people from being put in similar positions. So, yeah, I would say understanding the error practitioner's mental model would be key to any investigation.
And when you were doing those investigations and you came to a conclusion and somebody had made a mistake, obviously aviation's a little bit of it's serious. Like when there's,
Well, it depends. Yeah.
depends, right? So there's, I guess there's levels to mistakes. You kind of have to qualify what counts as a life-threatening one versus what is less serious. But did you actively, I guess, seek to engage people in that sort of that process, the investigative process?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, well, the person who, it's hard to say like error practitioners, like it's a weird term, but the person who made the mistake or violated, the person who's part of the subject of the investigation is also the subject matter expert. Of course, we're going to be dealing with other experts as well, right? Because they may have different perspectives that may be important to the investigation, but that person knows best about what was going on at that time. So you should be including them from the very start. And part of the reason is because, well, one of the good questions that you should be asking them is, how do you think we can prevent this from happening again in the future? Like,
wow,
you know where question. You came from. Yeah, exactly. And then I learned that with my former manager, Nicholas DeMock. Like, that's a key question, because one of the fallacies about, like, sometimes investigators think that they are out to find the answers, and that means also finding the solutions.
Right.
And that's not what we're here for. Well, yeah, I don't think that's what we're here for. Like, we're going to be working together with people to propose solutions and make recommendations and so on. But it's people on the line who most often know what the best solutions to a problem are.
It's powerful. That's a powerful question, right? Asking the person who was actually there, treating them like a subject matter expert, and engaging them throughout the whole process so that hopefully they can then carry that learning forth to other people around them.
Yeah.
When you're approaching, so let's say an incident's happened, and there's, this is the bad news. When you're bringing this to a leader, maybe I'll flip the script. If you are a leader and you're receiving that bad news, how should you, I guess, approach that? Because I think that there's a certain point where trust can really be gained here, or it can be lost. How can the leaders best approach that news that, something went wrong on site, something didn't work?
Well, people make mistakes, right? And I think another good quote is, you can either blame and punish or learn and improve. You got to pick one, right? You can't do both.
Right.
I think it was Sidney Decker, that one as well. So you got to tap into their maturity. Like, you as a mature leader, what do you want to do? Do you want to blame that person and punish them, and then next day hire a new person and have that new person make the same mistake or a different one, right? Or do you want to learn and improve? So that's always a good question. Like, if somebody comes to you, I don't know, a leader, and says, all right, we should fire them or blame or punish or whatever. Okay, so if we get another person doing that person's job, how are we going to ensure they don't make the same mistake? Or if that person, remains on the job, then it's punished, you can rest assured that that same mistake won't be made again by that person. But what about all the rest? Like, what about all the other things that can go wrong, right? So you don't want to have a person like laser focused on not making a single mistake ever again, right? You want to create that kind of resilience, kind of robustness in your system to accommodate failure, right? In a way that is not catastrophic.
Right. And, I think that it tunes into something, which is that there's collective learning to be had in every organization, right? You've had your career, I have mine, everyone has their experience. What are we not tuning into? What learnings have people already gone through that we aren't sharing, that we can collectively kind of be engaging in? And think of how much experience, everyone can really share, especially in the safety space. Something that frequently comes up is, and you've given talks on safety and to various different organizations, but once those talks happen, there's sort of an initial, right, we're going to be the safest people on planet Earth. And then there's a little bit of a drop off, and then it kind of falls off a cliff, right? How do we make sure that the lessons that we're teaching in safety are continuing beyond just the talk? How do we keep this going?
Yeah, that's a great question. So another cool thing I was reading about yesterday when it comes to system thinking is that a system is comprised of three things. So we have the elements, right? The interconnections between the elements and a purpose or function, right? So imagine a soccer team, right? You can change the elements, but the rules of the game are going to remain the same.
So the players, you can change the players.
Sorry, you can change the players, but the rules of the game are going to remain the same. Same thing for the purpose. We want to win, and this is how we should win. These are the rules that we should follow, and so on and so forth. For you to change a system, you have to change either its purpose or the interconnections. So if you go back to your company and you don't observe the dynamics that are going on, that are working to maintain the status quo, you're not going to change anything. So blame is a good example, right? So if you're blaming and punishing people for reporting stuff, right? That tells me that the purpose, the function of that system is not to produce safety, right? The function of that system is to, help people accountable in a negative way. So you got to shift that kind of interaction. And and again, Donella Meadows says that your focus should be on the interconnections, because in a way, the functions or the purpose is going to be a result of the interconnections between among your elements. I'm not sure if that makes any sense.
No, it does. It does. So there's an underlying system that, if not changed and not properly established, then no matter how many people you come in to have talk about it, it's going to be almost not fruitless, but it won't have the same lasting impacts that you want it to have over a longer period of time.
Absolutely. I mean, you can also change the people, right? You can change the elements, but only if the new people that you're bringing in are also bringing in a new notion of what the interplay between the elements should be. Like if you hire a new CEO, for example, and she or he is all about learning from mistakes, now you've changed the purpose of the system. Now you've changed the interconnections. So that would be an example of, changing the elements and changing the system.
And almost starting from the top and kind of helping break that ice in a way.
Yeah.
Right.
I think when you talk about psychological safety, like a blame culture can exist at various levels within an organization. So sometimes we have a super safety-oriented leadership, but then middle management doesn't share the same view, right? So psychological safety kind of ends here, doesn't go all the way to the top, or the other way around, right? It doesn't ever get to the frontline workers. So you got to be mindful of, how are you going to integrate all of these different levels within your safety management system, and to make sure that we're all living by the same purpose.
Special thanks to our sponsor, BIS Safety Software, one of the leading safety and compliance software applications on the market today. We wanted to shout out the team for their new lone worker technology, designed to provide enhanced protection and peace of mind for workers while they are working alone. It includes features like check-in schedules, automated notifications, and you can designate supervisors to receive alerts. This lone worker technology helps round out the full scope of their safety management software. Lone worker is just the tip of the iceberg. See everything they have to offer at bissafety.ca.
It applies to everyone. Absolutely. Fundamentally. Yeah. And you're right about the point that it can go both ways, where there's a top-down issue, or there's a bottom-up, where it kind of stops at a certain point. After, all of the experience investigating different safety incidents, I'm curious, you went into it, and then by the end of it, how had your perspective on, I guess, human error kind of changed throughout that time? Because I'm sure you'd seen a lot of it.
That is just so much fun, because this is the coolest part about incident and safety investigation, is because like what I do, and I just do it because it's fun, is I let myself think of the person who made a mistake as a stupid person. Oh, they're such, so stupid. How could they ever do this, right? And it works for me, because then I find it I really enjoy kind of deconstructing, like breaking this conception I initially had throughout the investigation, and getting to a point that, you know what, I could have done the exact same thing. And my manager, he would also say to people outside the safety department, whenever they would enter the safety department, say, "Oh, we just got this report. Can you believe what this guy did?" He would put these people's minds at ease, saying, "It is okay for you to think they're idiots. It is okay, but that's just only your starting point, right? And now what? Get that, as you said, get that out of your system. Oh, they're such idiots. All right, and now what? Now we got to prevent it from happening again." So then you start the investigation, and you start to understand the person's perspective. So I just find it so entertaining for you to see.
Almost an empathy component to it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? Where, yes, you're saying, okay, you're starting out and saying, okay, how could this person have possibly made this mistake? But then you're kind of grounding that as you go throughout the investigation until you get to the end, where you realize, like you said, oh man, I could have done this.
Yeah.
And I think fundamentally that's a huge part of being able to create a culture where people feel open to talk about these things, is when there's a certain level of humility and you understand that you could have made that same error yourself.
Yeah.
So aviation in particular can be, from my understanding, it can sometimes be high stress if you're flying for long hours and you're not properly taking care of yourself. How often do you see, I guess, fatigue and those sorts of issues in aviation? But also, I mean, these are things that apply to all industries, so it's not just a specific to that. But how often do you see that kind of coming up as a issue?
Well, it depends what kind of operation you're talking about. But of course, like long range operations, people struggle a lot with fatigue and circadian rhythm disruptions. And well, in aviation, we have something that we call fatigue risk management systems, which is a safety management system focused on the risk of fatigue only. The thing with aviation, and now trying to compare aviation in that respect with workplace safety, for example, is that we're kind of blessed in aviation because we have so many barriers. So take fatigue as an example. Like, you can have a tired pilot, but then you're going to have a fatigue risk management system that it's going to allow, that's actually going to prevent that pilot from being scheduled in such a way that fatigue is going to affect flight safety. You can have like policies related to fatigue, but then you go into technology, like you have flight envelope protection systems, right? Some airplanes will literally prevent you from doing certain things, certain flight control inputs. You have enhanced ground proximity warning systems. There's so many layers of protection that for fatigue to culminate in an accident, a lot of things must happen. When it comes to workplace safety, you do often have human beings interacting with machines, but we don't have as many layers of protection when we're talking about like
so many systems in place.
Yeah, like somebody on scaffolding, like
skid steer, whatever it might be.
Yeah, so there's not much out there, right, in terms of layers of protection. But I think, I don't know, maybe in the future that will come with technology. Like we have like wearable sensors these days. They're still a bit bulky and big, but God knows, in 10, 20 years we can have sensors and exoskeletons or whatever. So maybe those layers of protections are going to come for workers in general as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to implement those systems, I think, aviation, because there's higher risks involved, there can be more implementations of these systems. But what are we missing out on in other industries that kind of, where we should be doing this? Because there's risks everywhere, right? And finding a way, the fatigue management system and booking the flights so that they aren't, fatigued in a way is absolutely, something where I could see there being relevant crossover. So, we talked about this a little bit before the podcast started, but you mentioned that sometimes there's different, I guess, deviations in safety sectors, right? So there's the system safety, there's your basic standard protocols and all of that. But you mentioned something to me that I thought was interesting, which is sometimes one can get confused with the other. And also, if one is lacking and the others are strong, that lacking piece can really be the Achilles heel to a whole safety program. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because I find it interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first concepts I learned in safety is this, the difference between what reason calls an individual or occupational accident and an organizational accident. So in an individual accident, the person who suffers the accident is usually also the agent of the errors and mistakes that give rise to the accident. So the individual accident, the consequences are kind of contained within and around, a small space around the person, right? Whereas an organizational accident, we usually have like a lot of contributing factors and the consequences are widespread. So we're talking about multiple fatalities or environmental damage and so on. So it's a more complex kind of accident. And then along that same line, what we have is workplace safety and system safety. So workplace safety is about preventing, like ensuring workers' health and safety means, okay, not dying, but at the same time preventing the slips, trips, and falls and paper cuts, right? And system safety is not worried about all these things. And case in point, the operator I used to work with so the safety department only looked at flight safety matters. So this is going to sound blunt, but it's the truth. Like if we got a report from somebody saying, oh, I hurt my back, or I don't know, I slipped on the IC apron and fell, whatever. If that didn't have or couldn't have had a flight safety consequence, we couldn't care less about the event. That would be something the human resources department would have to deal with, right? And so what we did was essentially system safety. So system safety is something that kind of started between the 40s and 50s, because after World War II, we were building all these like atomic bombs and intercontinental missiles and all these extremely hazardous technologies that we couldn't afford to have failures, right? We couldn't no longer keep going with the fly, fix, fly approach, right? So that's when system safety comes along, like presenting and giving us methods and methodologies to assess risks from the very start. And system safety is looking at the human operator, but is looking at the system around them. And that's going to encompass the organization, the technology, right? The products and so on. So the idea behind system safety is engineering and designing inherently safe products and systems. So it's about design and operation. So we're going to, create a design that is safe for people. And we're going to ensure that throughout that design's life cycle, it's going to be operated safely. So and to your question, now going back, I speak too much, but no. And so the problem is when there's a natural overlap between these two safeties, and it's okay because we learn from one safety, like one safety learns from the other safety, and that's fine. But we got to be careful about like when we're focusing on one to the detriment of the other. So we were talking about Deepwater Horizon, the explosion of the oil rig, and also Texas City. Those two those two teams, that organization at the time of the accident, they were celebrating or they were recording really low rates of injuries, right? What does that tell you about your safety performance? Well, that tells me that from an occupational safety standpoint, we're doing a great job. But what about, in the case of the chemical industry, process safety, right? What about systems safety? Are we doing what we have to do, like what we must be doing to ensure that we don't have any catastrophic accidents, right? So when we mix the two and we lose sight of one of them, like during this mess that we create, we can end up having some really high consequence outcomes.
Wow, and it's a really interesting point that you bring up, that even though they had low reported incidents at this one particular rig, that didn't mean that there were the systems actually in place to prevent that sort of thing from happening. And I can almost, I can think now there's probably a lot of industries right now where they are thinking, oh, we've got a super, super safe environment.
Yeah.
But
we don't have accidents. Right?
we don't have any accidents. Yeah. But there's not the systems in place, and something slowly is kind of moving out of order. So I guess there's a benefit to having some sort of awareness of both, so that the people involved in one don't get tangled up in the other, and the other ones don't get back and forth, and vice versa.
Absolutely. And what you're saying, like, we don't have any accidents. What does that tell you about our safety performance, right? Well, accidents are a lagging indicator, right? So it's not telling us too much about the future, right? It's like looking in the back mirror and saying what happened. Incident and accident reporting may not help us be as proactive as our safety management system will like us to be. And one of the concepts that I do love about aviation, and perhaps this is probably the one thing that I would love for people in workplace safety to carry from aviation and other industries, is the habit of reporting hazards. We're not talking about things that happen. We're not talking about people getting hurt. We're talking about something that maybe one day you woke up and thought about and thought, you know what? We do this every day, and this is quite dangerous, right? Nothing happened, but you're still reporting it because it could potentially lead to an accident. So that is probably the most important shift in mindset that I'd like to see more in industry, generally speaking. And I think you got to be even more proactive. So reporting systems are very, in a way, reactive, right? And borderline proactive. But it's usually not great to detect normalization of deviance, as people say these days, and also that drift to a lower safety performance. Because if certain hazards become normalized, why would you report them? They're part of, the wall is gray. Okay, yeah, it's always been gray. Like, why am I talking about it? So people are not going to report it because it's part of, their acceptability criteria for risks. So you got to be more proactive. And I think, auditing is a great tool. And I think, and sometimes even simpler than that, when you hire new people, when you bring in new people to your company, they are this very powerful asset because they're also bringing in a fresh pair of eyes. They're probably going to be seeing things that you're no longer seeing for a really long time. So treating these people as, just sit there, there's a lot you got to learn, right? Just watch and learn, right? And not the other way around, like, come here, what do you think about this? Did you do it differently in your previous company? What do you think about, these practices and so on? So newcomers are a really powerful tool for a safety management system.
That's it's interesting that you bring up the concept of the hazards that people aren't reporting just because they aren't an incident, right? And I was speaking to an individual named Corey Pitzer, who was the founder of SafeMap International, and he was calling these far misses, which I think is a really interesting term. But he brought up the fact that if you are having more incidents reported than far misses reported,
Couldn't agree more. Yep.
where are we at right now? Like, what are we actually doing here, right? Because how much are we not seeing, right? And all that says is that more is happening than we're actually seeing.
Exactly.
And fundamentally, I think that that's a huge issue.
Yeah.
And, you know, the new people, bringing them in and fresh set of eyes. How much are we missing out on capitalizing on this? I mean, just, it's...
Yeah, we're missing a lot. And yeah, you don't see drift. Well, you can see drift. There's a few ways to do it. But normally speaking, if you don't go out looking for drift, and by drift, I mean drift towards lower safety performance, if you don't go out actively looking for it, you're not going to find it. It becomes the color of your walls. It's just there. You don't notice it anymore.
No, not at all. When it comes to working in environments where there's tight deadlines, where things have to get done at a specific time, pressure is often brought up as, you know, a problem. The pressure to do things quickly instead of the right way. How do you go about making sure that we're still doing things the right way or properly in a safe manner, despite maybe some outside pressure? In your example, it might be to do with the flight's late or something gets delayed, but in all industries this happens, right? What are some of those tools that were reminders that people can kind of come back to make sure they're grounded?
We should try and prevent excessive pressure, right? This is, Luca, this is groundbreaking. No, this is like the obvious thing to do. Pressure can be a really big pain in your safety management system. So yes, you should strive to prevent it. The two things I've been hearing a lot in industry lately is, well, one is a focus on identifying critical controls. So you're going to have a system with a series of controls. They're going to help your system become, remain safe, but not all of these controls are going to be critical. So look at your system and try to identify which controls are critical, because those are the ones that you're going to have to work harder to enforce under different circumstances: high pressure, bad weather, uncertainty, ambiguity, whatever. You know what your critical controls are, and you have to create a system that enforces those critical controls. So it's about prioritizing the things that are really going to keep people safe. And the other thing is, I'm not a huge fan of this one, but it's designing, this is going to be a bit subjective, but it's designing in your system points where people are obliged to stop and think. There's a NASA researcher. Now that's a good one. Like, one of the things that I do is I use this theory a lot. Like, back when I was flying helicopters, like, there's a few things you need to do. Like, you're preparing the aircraft, right?
Just a few things.
It was a small helicopter.
Okay.
But there's a few things you had to do. So you're pre-flying the helicopter, inspecting the helicopter from outside and inside, right? And maybe you want to leave, I don't know, a cowling open because a fuel truck is a little bit late, and you can do all this stuff while, you wait for the truck. But you don't want to forget that cowling open. So what you do is you design something in your system that is going to prevent you from moving forward unless you fulfill a certain condition. So you could get creative. Like, I would put some kind of object on the battery switch or the starter switch. So, I couldn't start the helicopter without remembering to close the cowling that I'd opened before, right? So those checkpoints, in a way, those things that you put in your way that prevent you from moving forward, those things that you design should, work in such a way that you're remembered to accomplish certain steps before moving forward. And under pressure, it could be a good tool. Definitely not flawless, but can become in handy.
That's a great example. I mean, in my own life, you can think of examples where, you might put your toothbrush out or do certain things to just remind yourself of specific behaviors. If you want to go for a run, you put your running shoes out.
Well, it's not that you're going to forget your shoes.
Not going to forget your shoes.
But, yeah.
But if you like at the front door, so you can remember that, hey, I got to put my running shoes on because I'm going for a run, right? That's a phenomenal tool to think about. And it's, I think, directly applicable from systems thinking over to workplace safety.
Oh, yeah.
And how can we bring those two together? Well, that's a phenomenal example of one way that we can actually engage the thinking side of the brain.
Yeah, and it's worked for me many times. And as I was saying, this is, I can't remember the guy's name. It's a NASA researcher. He's got a paper that he talks about this. And yeah, like if you need to, grab your wallet before leaving the house, you just put the wallet in front of the door because you're going to open the door, you're going to drag your wallet. Oh, I need to take care of my wallet. So it's small things that you can do, even in the workplace. Of course, you got to be careful whether you're not like adding hazards to the workplace. So you got to be diligent and think everything through. But there's simple things that you can do that are going to help you slow down and think before doing the next step.
So on the flip side of this, you've given us some good systems. At what point does it become too much? At what point are you over-engineering safety? Because I think that there's a fine line between implementing something effectively versus ineffectively. And I was just wondering, do you have any sort of examples or just in your mind when that actually becomes too much?
I think when we talk about procedures, that's a big one, right? There's this concept I really liked. It's called safety clutter by Dr. Drew Ray. So safety clutter is the things, artifacts, rules, procedures, best practices, whatever, things that you put in place in the name of safety, but which at the end of the day don't do anything for safety, or they're even worse, like they can create additional risks, right? And how does safety clutter happen? Well, there's companies out there that they're subjected to different regulations, right? And sometimes regulations are saying the same thing or have different requirements, and you have to combine them all. So you start to add all these layers of protection, or the layers that you think are for your own protection of regulations and procedures and so on, because these regulations and I don't know, I'm just going to say regulations and rules, generally speaking, because they require you to do it. But then you get to a point that you have a cluttered system. You're not being any safer because of all that paper. So if you have a management system, you're integrating, I don't know, a health and safety management system with a quality management system, you're going to have different requirements. So you have to do a really good job at combining these requirements, doing like a really robust gap analysis and making sure that the integrated management system that you're going to be creating is not duplicating information, it's not duplicating procedures and so on. Yeah.
And I think that, technology plays a big role in this. Now we're also seeing everyone talking about AI, right? And all the ways that we can digitize what was originally paper and bringing it onto a digital world. In the space of safety, I'm curious, what are some of those, advancements that you've seen in technology that have really sort of, changed the way that we're approaching safety?
Well, at least in aviation, we've got quite a few. I think everybody would agree with the ground proximity warning systems, which is a system that tells the pilot you're approaching the ground, approaching terrain.
Nice to know.
Yeah, exactly. So they're getting more modern as the years go by. But you have the flight envelope protection systems where the aircraft is going to be, where you're going to program in the aircraft, all it's allowed to do. And whatever goes outside this envelope, you limit the pilot's inputs. So we don't allow to descend too fast or things like that into one. As far as artificial intelligence goes, there's not much going on the there is a lot going on the aviation side, but what I'm trying to say is there's a huge, I'm not going to call it a hurdle, but a barrier in aviation, which is a positive barrier, which is like you cannot certify a design that is non-deterministic. So you ask ChatGPT, a question, and then the next day you ask the same question, you're probably going to have a different answer, right? So we cannot certify and ensure the safety of systems that are not deterministic. I'm not sure if that makes sense. So AI is becoming a big thing everywhere. Aviation is not excluded, but when it comes to autonomous aircraft, it's still going to take a while. Yeah.
Interesting.
And I hope it does.
Yeah. So we're still going to have pilots?
I hope so.
For a little while yet. It's interesting that, as you were kind of breaking down your different thoughts and ideas that you mentioned, there's a lot of different other thinkers that you read about and you listen to. Right now for yourself, when it comes to safety, both system safety and workplace and wherever it might apply, what are the new or next concepts that you're really excited about yourself?
Well, I do like the concept of building resilient systems, because we've come to a point now where everything is so complex. And I say we've come to a point now, but actually this was something that Charles Perrow said in 1984. Like in 1984, he said, we've come to a point where systems are so complex that they're actually exceeding our capacity to understand them. So he said we shouldn't be building nuclear power plants because they're so complex that if something happens, we're not going to be able to anticipate that. And 2 years later, we had Chernobyl. But yeah, we're not saying no to complexity, right? Complexity is still going to be there more and more. And precisely because we can't understand our systems completely, safety is going to mean creating resilient and recoverable systems. This is Hull-Nagel saying, this is a lot of people saying, but this is Nancy Levinson saying. So we should strive to prevent failure as best as we can, to prevent a point in the system life cycle where we have a loss of control. But we must also acknowledge that we might get to that point and there are still things we can do, right? So it doesn't matter what brought us to losing control of our system, of a hazard, for example. Now we should do something to recover that system. Now we should do something to design that system in such a way that we're going to bring the operating point back to safe levels or acceptably safe levels. And I think this idea is beautifully illustrated in the bow tie diagram, right? You have the threats on the side, and then in the middle you have the top event, the loss of control. But then on the right-hand side, there's all the cool stuff that we can do to mitigate the risk coming from the top event, right? So there's still things that we can do. So preventing complexity, but at the same time acknowledging that it exists and creating resilient systems, I think should be the way for us to move forward in safety.
I love it. There's so much there that I think, for all of the listeners and viewers to kind of take away and think about. And I'm sure that people want to hear more about the work you're doing. Where can people find what you're up to?
Well, I've got a LinkedIn profile, so you can follow me there. I do not post too much, but I try and engage in as many conversations as I can in discussions, and yeah, that's about it.
Totally, yeah, and we'll include the link down below to link to your LinkedIn as well there. Luca, I want to thank you again for coming on and sharing your experience in this space, and I'm eager to see where this journey kind of takes you next.